Exploring with Amerigo Vespucci by Ellen B. Cutler. Who was Amerigo Vespucci? Amerigo Vespucci was not the first European explorer to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. He did not lead an expedition ashore to explore the new land. Nor did he bring back shiploads of gold and other wealth. The continents he called the New World, however, are named for him. The early years. Amerigo Vespucci was born in Florence, Italy, on March 9, 1454. His father was a notary, or a person who kept important records. The entire family, in fact, was well respected. Young Vespucci received a good education. He learned to read and write in Latin. He studied geography, math, and astronomy. Vespucci put his excellent education to use in service of the Medici family, who sent him on a mission to France and then employed him in Florence. The Medici ruled Florence for nearly 300 years, and they were also one of the most powerful families in Europe. A sense of adventure. Vespucci was an able man and earned the Medici's confidence. In 1491, Vespucci was sent to Seville, Spain, and put to work at a company that supplied and prepared ships to go to sea. Spain was a great maritime power, with ships that traveled from Spanish ports through Europe to northern Africa and the Middle East. It was an exciting time that stirred Vespucci's sense of adventure and increased his interest in geography. He knew about Columbus's first voyage across the Atlantic in 1492, and Vespucci's company stocked the fleet of ships that Columbus commanded on his second expedition in 1493. It was around this time that the two men met and became friends. Vespucci's voyages. Although no longer a young man, Vespucci was determined to play an active role in the search for a sea route to the Far East. He knew how to ready a ship for such a long sea voyage. His studies of astronomy had prepared him for the work of a navigator, or a person who plots a ship's course. Conversations with seafarers like Columbus made Vespucci sure he would be successful. In 1499, Vespucci embarked on his first voyage. Systems of navigation. Navigation is the science of guiding a boat safely from one place to another. A navigator must determine what course to take, how far the ship has traveled, and where it is on the open sea. Today, there are instruments that show a ship's latitude and longitude. In Vespucci's day, however, navigators followed the stars. Clouds and storms could easily push the sailors and their ships off course. Sailors used an astrolabe to determine latitude. With an astrolabe, they could measure the height of the sun in the sky at noon or a star at night. From these measurements, sailors knew how far north or south they were. It was difficult, however, to keep the astrolabe in a steady position, focused on a star, while the ship pitched and rolled on the waves. Measuring longitude was more difficult, as sailing boats often had to take a zigzag course to make best use of the wind. Most navigators used a system called dead reckoning, in which the navigator followed changes in the ship's direction using a compass. The navigator tracked how many hours the ship had been sailing and how fast it had been going. From this information, the distance east or west the ship had traveled could be determined. The first voyage. In 1499, Vespucci sailed on one of 4 ships headed across the Atlantic. When the ships reached the coast of what is now South America, Vespucci continued south in search of a passage to India. He sailed beyond the mouth of the Amazon River before turning north to sail up the coast. Vespucci arrived back in Spain by June 1500. Vespucci halted his expedition because his ship was not seaworthy. Vespucci was sure, however, that he had found the route to Asia, and he had already planned his return. The second voyage. The Spanish government refused to support a second expedition. Vespucci turned, therefore, to another maritime power, Portugal. Vespucci embarked on his second voyage from the city of Lisbon in May 1501. This time, Vespucci took a more southerly route across the Atlantic and was able to explore farther down the coast of South America. It is likely that he reached the southern border of Brazil, and he may even have gone as far as southern Argentina. It is not known what route he took back to Portugal, but Vespucci's ship anchored in Lisbon in July 1502. Vespucci the Navigator. Drawing upon his knowledge of geography, math, and astronomy, Vespucci was an excellent navigator. However, scholars at the time were unsure as to how far Asia extended to the east. This proved troublesome for explorers who set out to explore the new route to Asia. Finally, Vespucci concluded that neither he nor Columbus had succeeded in reaching Asia. Vespucci came to this conclusion after comparing the land he had reached to what was known about Asia at the time. He determined that he and Columbus had come to a land that would become known throughout Europe as the New World. Vespucci's conclusion is considered by many to be his greatest achievement, for it changed the way Europeans looked at the world. In addition to making this revelation, Vespucci also charted thousands of miles of the coastline he reached during his second voyage. Today, this continent is known as South America. Yet another tribute to Vespucci's skill as a navigator was his calculation of the distance around the world at the equator. His figure is said to have come within 50 miles of the actual measurement. Descriptions of the New World. In his letters, Vespucci wrote that the native peoples he had seen were fast runners and excellent swimmers. He noted, too, that their skin was an almost red color, like a lion's mane. Vespucci listened to the speech of the people and decided that each group had its own language. The people built huts from branches and palm leaves. Some of the houses, Vespucci wrote, were so large that in one single house we found there were 600 souls. The people Vespucci saw placed a high value on things like feathers, birds' plumes of many colors, and they made necklaces from fish bones and white or green stones. Although the people knew about gold, jewels, and pearls, Vespucci said, they seemed not to care for them. Vespucci's last years. At the end of his life, Vespucci was one of the most famous and respected people in Europe. The letters he wrote describing his voyages were copied into several languages and printed under titles such as The 4 Voyages of Amerigo and The New World. In 1505, Vespucci became a Spanish citizen. In recognition of his achievements, the Spanish government named him Piloto Mayor, or Master Navigator. One of Vespucci's duties was to prepare a map of the routes ships should take when traveling to what he called the New World. Vespucci died in Seville, Spain, in 1512. The naming of America. Both Amerigo Vespucci and Christopher Columbus realized that the lands they had found were a continent and not islands. While Columbus remained convinced that he had discovered an unknown part of Asia, Vespucci believed the lands were a new world. The cartographer Martin Waldseemüller suggested the name Americus, or America, in 1507. He was working on a new and more current map of the world when he heard reports about newly explored lands across the Atlantic Ocean. The map Waldseemüller created was the first to include these lands,